Tommy Steele, today top of the bill at the London Palladium. A Londoner whose personality and ability to entertain have taken him from a job as ship steward to star in the Royal Variety performance.
Now, I followed the Count Basie Orchestra with a trio. Now, that itself is murder. I sung Rock with the Caveman, which fell on deaf ears, and everybody just kept looking to the royal box. And then when I came to the last song, which was a song called Singing the Blues, I invited the audience to join in and clap their hands, to which they didn't. And they all looked to the royal box again, and I'll never forget, God bless her, the Queen Mother leant over the box and looked down to the audience, and she went, and they all started to clap. She saved my life.
Today he's an international star. Even by show business standards, the Tommy Steele story is unusual. He was born in 1936 in a slum terrace in the poorest part of London. His family had no show business connections, and a career at sea seemed to offer the best opportunities. Hoping to join the Mauretania or the Queen Elizabeth, he signed with the Cunard Line. He was posted to the Scythia, a far less glamorous ship, which he joined for the first time in the early hours of the morning, accidentally moving into a passenger cabin, a mistake quickly put right when the other stewards heard about it.
All of a sudden the door opened, and in they came. There must have been about 20 of them, all young fellas, commie waiters, bellboys, and they grabbed me, and they dragged me and me clothes out of the wardrobe, and they dragged me along the lovely teak-lined decks and the carpet until it stopped being carpet and became rubberized. And after the rubber came the thick, sort of greasy wood of the deck, and we kept going down. I remember down another flight, and down another lot, and down another lot, until I could smell the grease from the engines. I could hear the screws turning round. I suddenly found myself going deeper and deeper. It was getting darker and darker. There were these great big things called watertight doors, and there was no more signs about saying mind your head. It was now look out, you know. And suddenly they dragged me into this bloody great room, and the door opened, clang, and echoed. And there was a cabin for 20. And there was a dirty, decrepit little bunk stuck underneath a louver, which gave me a stiff neck for a year. And I was chucked onto this. My clothes were stuck into a tin locker that was bent from years back and never ever locked. And there I sat, and I looked round at these 19 other grinning faces as they looked at me and they said, "There's no bleating telephone down here, son." And I cried my eyes out for about 2 days.
He spent 4 years at sea. It was on board ship that his interest in music began. He borrowed a guitar from the ship's cook and taught himself to play. By experimenting with the rhythm and by emphasizing the offbeats, he produced the sound that was soon to make him famous.
The old time cave dweller lived in a cave. This is what he did when he wanted to rave. He took a stick and he drew on the wall.
When he wasn't at sea, he lived at home in London and spent his spare time writing songs with some friends. He sang the songs in coffee bars with a group called the Vipers.
I was with a group called the Vipers, which was a big skiffle group, which went on to be a big skiffle group, but at the time was nothing. And I'd been singing and playing with the Vipers for weeks, months, on odd-off trips from the ship, and was suddenly told that they'd disbanded. And I went to the Bread Basket, which was an old coffee bar that we used to play, and said, you know, it's a shame that the band is disbanded. And they said, oh no, it's appearing tonight, the first night of the Two Eyes Coffee Bar in Old Compton Street, which is the Mecca. It's the London Palladium of the coffee bars, they said. So I thought, bloody cheek. He told me that group split up. So I thought, I'll go down there and I'll have it out with him. So I go down the coffee bar, down into the basement, and there are thousands of kids, all sweaty, drinking Cokes. And the skiffle group is going, singing skiffle, which I hated anyway. And there in the background were all these photographers, flash, 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 going the cameras. I thought, well, I can't have too much of an argument down here with all this going on. So I grabbed the guitar off of one of the players, and I sang a couple of numbers. Stuck it back in his hand and walked out in defiance. I thought, oh, I'll have me 10 minutes worth. And I walked out, and walked down the street, and one of these photographers was following me, so I thought, well, I'll shake him off at this other coffee bar, you know, I wanted another one, and he followed me in there. So I said, here, I said, you following me? I thought, you know, fight fire with fire, frighten the life out of him, show him my very mask. You following me, I said. So he said, matter of fact, I am, yes. He said, my name's John Kennedy. So I said, yes. He said, I want to be your general manager. He said, I think you've got star material. I said, yes. And he said, and I'm going to be your manager, and we're going to go on to fame and fortune. So I said, oh, yes. I said, what do you know about managing? He said, nothing. What do you know about singing? So I said, nothing. So he said, it's a perfect basis for a partnership.
As Steele was 19, the Kennedy contract had to be signed by his mother. She was by no means convinced that her son faced a glorious future in show business, and when the prospects were outlined, she gave Kennedy an ultimatum.
She said, if he ain't a star in 2 weeks, she said, if he ain't a star in 2 weeks, he's going back to see Enter Tom. So I said, yes. 2 weeks you got. It was about 12 days, actually. I mean, we didn't realise what we were saying. You know, it was, we were using words like star and success and big time and top banana, and all these things were coming out of these Hollywood films. I mean, you don't associate it with yourself.
4 days later, he was front page news. Kennedy showered the press with photographs and arranged for a television appearance and a record audition. The record went straight to the top of the charts, and within a week he was being pursued everywhere by screaming teenagers. Just 1 week after his first professional engagement, he was booked as a star. It was the first time he'd ever been on a stage. Comedians Mike and Bernie Winters were on stage before him.
So Bernie came over and said, are you him? I said, what? He said, are you him, Steely? So I said, yes. He said, well, you better get yourself made up. You better get yourself ready. The people are waiting for you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you got to put a bit of slap on. I said, slap? He said, makeup. I didn't know what he was talking about. So he took me into his dressing room, and he made up that side of my face. And he said, now you've seen that side, you've got to make up that side now. He said, and then you'll be ready. He said, because we do 15 minutes, I think it was. Everything was fine. I was sitting in their room listening to their songs and their comedy, and thank God their laughter and their applause. And then I heard Bernie go, a tree that looks a good old day, a tree that lifts his arms to pray, I am a tree, I am a tree. And I heard the audience screaming with laughter. And what happens is that as he says that, their dog, Lulu, runs from the OP side of the stage, runs across, cocks his leg up Bernie's leg, and then runs off into the dressing room. It's been doing it for bloody years. I'm sitting there ready to go on. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Sunderland Empire, a great pleasure to introduce to you the drum roll. The bloody dog wouldn't let me out of the room. I'm trying to get out. Tommy! Dun, 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 dun. I thought, Christ, and I run. Excuse me. I run for the stage. The dog's tearing at me bloody jeans. Grab me guitar, run on. And that was me opening night. I had no nerves. Just had the arse out of my trousers.
Stairs, which worried the cafe's manager, Major Donald Neville Willing, and Steele himself, far more than the audience.
And to go downstairs like this, as he admitted, you've got to have class, you've got to have presence, and a great deal of experience. Well, I didn't have any class. I didn't have any presence. But I had been in the business 6 weeks, so I felt the stairs are going to be no bloody problem at all. Comes the night, blackout, the drum rolls. Ladies and gentlemen, the Café de Paris have great pleasure to present to you. Now I've got the guitar, but I can't find the lead in the dark. And I'm feeling around for the bloody lead to stick it in the guitar, because I was told you can't. I walk in from the dressing room, you walk, there's the dressing room, there's the stairs. You walk from the dressing room with the guitar. You get to the stairs, all blackout, because it's the big star entrance. You get to the top of the stairs, being sure you ain't going to fall down them in the blackout. Take the plug, stick them in your hole, the light comes on, you walk down the stairs. What could be easier? Couldn't find the plug. And every time you touch an electric plug, it goes, I've also got a microphone in my hand. Guitar, microphone, plug, on. Ladies and gentlemen, Cavity Parry. Never willing saying, will you hold it properly? Will you hold it properly in the dark? Now put it in, put it in, put it in. That's it, that's it, that's it. Boom, my star.
The Café de Paris appearance was followed by his first major film, as the star of the Tommy Steele story. It was followed by a tour of Scandinavia and a further tour of Great Britain. While waiting to go on stage one night, he was introduced to dancer Anne Donahue. He wanted to marry her, but his managers thought any announcement of an engagement wouldn't be appreciated by his fans. So a tour of South Africa was arranged, a country he had never visited before, and one where he wasn't sure what kind of welcome to expect.
So there was this little car with the top down. Well, it wasn't little, it was a bloody great limousine with the top down. John, Larry and I sat in the back, and off we went towards Cape Town, and this driver was shaking like a leaf. What are you frightened for? Oh, they're going to call the police off, he said. Little coloured man, going to call the police off. I said, well, can't hurt you, blimey, you know. We've passed the mob, the 200. That's behind us. They're following on their bikes and things. Yeah, we're all right. We get to the top of this hill, and we hear, sounding like locusts. What's that? Nothing, come on. And we turn the corner, 750,000 people. 750,000 people were lining the streets of Cape Town, held back by loads of armed and mounted police. And a big hooter went, and they all bloody left. They just disappeared, the uniform disappeared. And these people came at us. The car at one time was lifted up in the air. Anyway, we got to this hotel, and the manager was sweating outside the hotel. Please, he said, please don't come in here, don't come in here. But we booked it here, we said. Yes, I know, he said, but please, he said, look, he said, I retire at the end of this year. He said, if you're here, he said, they're going to tear this place to pieces and my record will go out the window. So we went down to the docks, being chased by all these people, gradually lost them, and stayed at a hotel, acting the part, a dockside hotel, and I acted the part of a Swedish seaman for 5 days, with an Italian waiter there, and I never spoke English for 5 days. And then he'd go away, I'd say, I'd have egg and bacon. And John Kennedy would say, my friend will have egg and bacon. And at the end of 5 days, we were leaving, and the Italian waiter came up and he said, hey, you do me one favor before you leave. I said, what? He said, sign your photo. I did 5 days, he said. You speak a lot of language, yeah?
From South Africa, he returned to London to appear for the first time in a family show, a musical pantomime by Rodgers and Hammerstein.
And I was working with the greatest writers of musicals in the world. And every day, sitting in the front stalls was Oscar Hammerstein, as I sang through his immortal words. And he sent me a note backstage after the dress rehearsal. He said, dear Tommy, my knowledge of English and my presentation of the language, as I'm sure you will agree, pretty competent. And he said, and if you don't mind, when I write, far from flimsy fancy negligee, I would like to hear far from flimsy fancy negligee. Yours sincerely, Oscar. And so I wrote back and said, dear Oscar, your knowledge of the English language and presentation of same is worldwide indeed. I quote, there ain't nothing like a dame. And he sent back, touche, Oscar.
A few weeks later, Tommy and Anne were married in a church in London, Soho, not far from the coffee bar where his career had started. His next stage appearance was quite different to anything he'd done before. The part of Tony Lumpkin in Oliver Goldsmith's classic, She Stoops to Conquer. He took the part, and a part in The Servant of Two Masters, to learn more of the techniques of acting. Techniques which came in useful in his next major part, one of the most successful of his career, Arthur Kipps in Half a Sixpence. He was invited to star in The Happiest Millionaire, produced at studios owned and run by a film executive soon to become a close personal friend, Walt Disney.
And one day I sat there with him and we had this marvellous thing because neither of us wanted anything from each other. And I said to him one day, tell me, Joe, I said, do you know that nearly all these people in this restaurant are dead scared of you? He said, no. I said, no, come they are. I said, look at them all dodgy about. I said, most of them when you walk in. I said, what's it like? He said, well, to be truthful, he said, sometimes it's very amusing. I said, wow. He said, well, he said, the story of the red dress. He said, now you must promise that you'll never tell anyone I told you this story while you're here. So I said, I promise I won't. In fact, this is the first time I've ever said it. Forgive me, Gus. He said, well, one day I came in to look at the rushes, which is the dailies, like you shoot one day, Monday, and you see them back Tuesday afternoon. And he said, and I sat there, and a girl came on screen, on film, in a red dress. And I turned round to the producer of the film, and I said, what's that girl doing in that red dress? He said, now what I meant was, what is that girl doing in that red dress? He said, but from that day to this, some 15 years, there's never been a girl in a red dress in any film that I've ever made. And he said, and do you know, I can't tell them to change it. Not now. He says, I'm stuck. He said, and so I just let them believe I hate girls in red dresses.
Steele enjoyed working at the Disney studios, though he still prefers stage appearances to filming. His next major American film showed him another side of Hollywood, a side which still amazes him.
That was the days of the last days of the real moguls, like Jack Warner. Jack Warner was the boss. The next day I was invited to lunch at the executive commissary. And you walked into this panelled room, and at the end of this long teak boardroom luncheon table, which was reminiscent of King Arthur, was this great big baronial chair, which was for Jack Warner, who was about as tall as sixpence of coppers. And sitting either side was all the executives in their Savile Row suits, or the American equivalent of, with ties. You had to wear a tie, and you had to wear a coat. And then he came in, like a Führer, sat down, everybody stood up. Everybody sat and looked to the desk. He'd do a gag, everybody laugh. He'd start to eat, everybody would eat. 2 days later, he strutted about that place like the boss. 2 days later, he sold out for $52 million to 7 Arts. I was invited to lunch by the people of 7 Arts, who were friends of mine. I walked into the boardroom. The big chair had been moved in among all the little chairs, and an ordinary chair was put at the end. The boss then, the son of the boss, sat there. He walked in. Everyone had their ties off, their coats off, and he sat down, and he sat on the only available chair, which wasn't the big one. And he tried to speak, and he kept getting shouted down by the people that were listening to him. Excuse me, Jack. So-and-so. Yeah, but what? Yeah, just a minute. So-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I saw Jack Warner fall to pieces in an hour. And I thought, there's a man who's a multi-millionaire, didn't need the money, a multi-millionaire, yet he sold out his lifeline. And here it was, they were tearing him to pieces before my eyes. It was the most degrading thing I'd ever seen happen. And he crawled out of that dining room. And he crawled into his Lincoln Continental. And the Lincoln Continental drove quietly out of the studios, and I never saw him again.
In 1969, a daughter, Emma, was born. The christening party was for family and friends, the sort of informal gathering Steele really enjoys, though he also enjoys some of the show business parties he goes to.
I think the best, most exciting show business party I ever went to was in New York for Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon. It was, they were on the tour of New York, and it was a marvellous, real, one of those evenings from the MGM films where everybody that was there was someone that you could look up to and go, oh Christ, look who's that over there. Ethel Merman sang the opening songs. Barbara Streisand sang a couple of songs. Alan J. Lerner spoke I'd grown accustomed to her face, while sort of Count Basie tinkered it in the background, just him on piano. Benny Goodman played a marvellous piece on the clarinet. And the greatest thing of all was Jason Robards, the actor, came up to me and said, Tommy, when the hell are they going to get here? And I said, Jason, they're here, and they've been here for about 6 hours. He said, look, no one's introduced them to me, you know what I mean? I mean, I've never met a real lord. I mean, you know, when do I get to talk to the guy? So I said, well, Jason, please, you know, you'd have to write quite a few. And when then Princess Margaret and Tony had suddenly got up and they were leaving, the most embarrassing thing of all was Barbara Streisand came up to Princess Margaret. She'd arrived with me. And she said, I'm very sorry I was late, Princess Margaret, but I got screwed up somewhere on Broadway, which was itself. So I said, she meant, ma'am, was that, and so Princess Margaret said, yeah, I know. So I said, and she said, you know, and I'm gefuffling around, you know what I mean? And, you know, you get goosed here and there, and it takes time to get here, you know. Barbara didn't mean any offence, it was just the way she spoke. But just then, as Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon went to leave, this voice shouted, standing on top of a settee like this, Lord, my name's Jason Robards, and I'm drunk. And he collapsed.
Away from press and public, he enjoys painting. The subjects he paints reflect many of his interests. He's a keen footballer. His football supporters are painted from memory. The conductor, too, is a view he knows well across the footlights. He also collects antiques.
I've always been a one for collecting little bits of antiquities. And this one is a little old music box. And it says along here, for instance, mandolin expressive, 9 timbres ziva. We all know what that means, don't we? Of course, my claim to fame is I know which thing to open and which switch to pull.
Today, the careers of pop singers are often hectic and short. By adapting his style and techniques, Steele has remained a popular figure, a man with an infectious personality, and one who today finds he can do exactly what he wants.
I'm very lucky that I still get great offers come to me, and I'm able to pick and choose, and to concentrate and take my time. That's the main thing. I don't believe in throwing things on for the audiences. I believe that you've got to consider them and the piece you're doing, and if the two can meet, you're lucky, very lucky.